this tools and resources for records management workshop. This particular session is supposed to be more interactive, so feel free to jump in at any time. We do have some set slides, but we're here to provide the most for you at this time. So our presenters today who are specifically attending are Chris Stenson, who's the State Records Manager at the Oregon State Archives, Matt Brown from the Oregon State Archives, who's the Program Administrator for ORMS, myself, the State Archivist for Wyoming, Carmen Clayton, who is the Supervisor of the Records Management Unit and State Imaging Center at the Wyoming State Archives, Cindy Brown, who's our Digital Archivist, and Stephanie Gertken, the Records Analyst. So this whole workshop has led up to providing you with tools and resources to continue on your journey for coming up with a records management program, dealing with digital records, and starting to think about how you're going to work on that. Of course, you will always have the presenters as your resources as well, including Alejandra, who's also listening in. But we want you to get started. So, we want to provide you the tools to get on the road and going. We're going to talk about some aggregate resources, web pages that have like a lot of resources on them. And then we're going to talk about some software tools and equipment that we use in our respective repositories. And then there's going to be some time for like general Q&A, and then we'll do a quick wrap-up session. So I'm just going to begin here with aggregate resources for tools. One of my all-time favorite tools that I always talk about is the Power Tool Grid. And I think this is the most amazing thing in the world, just because it talks about all these different tools and software tools that can do all these different functionalities. So the Power Tool Grid was created around 2012 to 2014, and it was funded through the IMLS, the Institute of Museum and Library Resources group. And what they essentially wanted to do was be able to provide a quick and dirty understanding of what the different tools in the archives field can do. And so you see here that you'll list on the left the actual name of the tool, and it's in blue because it's hyperlinked. And then it'll tell you what kind of function of the archives it will do. So ingest, processing, access, storage, maintenance, and most important, in purple, you'll see that there is a cost. So they have gone through a number of phases on this project, and their first phase was directly updating this power grid. And so I'll just say, they have moved on to different phases where they offer day institutes and assessment programs. So some of the information might be a little outdated and not as up to date as you would hope, but I think it's a great tool for getting started. The other aggregate resource I think is pretty amazing is the Strategies for Advancing Hidden Collections by the Digital Library Federation. And this is specifically a link to their wiki page. I think that this is really easy to quickly jump to different pages and learn more about it. What I found would be most useful to this group in talking about resources is sections 4, 5, and 6. And they're talking about tools for collection management and considerations for developing programs and projects. Also, I'll note here that CLEAR also has some strategies for working with hidden collections that can be referenced. So I think that's a great way to get started on your projects. So I'll turn it over to Cindy.
Okay. So I figured before we get too deep into it, I'd answer the fixity question from yesterday. What fixity tools do we suggest? And first I wanted to step back just a notch and explain what a fixity tool is. And basically the premise is fixity assurance is that the digital file has remained unchanged. And then you'll hear us talk periodically of checksums or hash values, and they're basically a tool within fixity. They're kind of like a fingerprint of the digital file. So that being said, in my mind, there are two types of fixity tools. There's the ones that generate and the ones that verify what you've come up with. So I've kind of got them split into the two groups. So for generating, I put my favorite one on top. And it's not just because of what it's called, hash my files. It's a really simple tool and it works really well. It's free, allows easy creation of hash values. The Karen's directory printer was the one that I mentioned yesterday, which is, like I said, pretty old school. And you can tell by the title what it was created to do. You know, so a lot of times if you end up with, like a CD or a flash drive with a bunch of digital records on it, you could use Karen's directory printer to give you an Excel spreadsheet showing all of the names of the folders and what's in them, how many items, things like that. But in addition to doing all the directory printing, it also creates hash values. The next one is NARA File Analyzer, and it's an open source Java-based multifunction tool. So what it does is it performs a file test. So it'll validate the file names, the file types, and calculate checksums. In my mind, I think it's very powerful, but it's a little harder to use. So it all depends on what you want. If you want to do it to do multiple things at the same time, both this one and the next two are a good way to go. Data accessioner used to be called Duke Data Accessioner. It's again, open source Java-based multifunction. Its primary use is in the title. It's used to accession or migrate files. It identifies the formats and generates checksums. And some of you may be more experts on this, and I know I'm probably leaving some of the fine minutia out, but we've got a lot to cover, so I didn't go too deep again. Then the last one is called Droid. Again, open source, Java-based multifunction tool. It was developed by the National Archives in the UK, and it identifies file formats. It does directory printing and checksums. So those are generation tools. Okay. So I'm going to move on to the tool. So now that you create these checksums or hash values, that's nice. But how do you verify whether they've changed or not? That's when you use these type of tools. And again, in my mind, there's two types. There's the manual ones, or there's the ones that you can schedule. So having a manual fixity verification tool doesn't bother me a whole lot, because in the digital archives, when we do our once a month integrity check, we just do it the first day of the month. We know it. It's not scheduled, we do it. So I don't think it's a drawback. So the first one is called Exact File. I really like the names of these things sometimes. So it's an open source file integrity verification tool used to make sure that the file copies are bit perfect copies. And it does create checksums, and it boasts that it can be used on very large files, because I'm sure some of the smaller ones may choke on them. Fixity AV Preserve. There's the there's the pro version of it that it has a schedule mechanism, and then there's this manual one. But it is a subscription-based tool, which can be manually run, or like I said, set to regularly review and monitor checksums. The NARA file analyzer. Was thinking I mentioned it above in the generation tool as one of those multifunction tools. And then the bottom one's a little weird because I know a bunch of you guys probably use 7-zip as a way to open up zip files or send zip files. But it actually has the capability of generating hash values. And so where you could use it is if somebody's sending you a zip folder, they can send you the hash value for the folder and you can compare it to what you received to make sure nothing was lost in transit. So it's one of those, does a lot of different things tools. And then these are the scheduled tools where you could tell it when you want it to do where. The first one, I'll be honest, I had never heard of, but it sounds fascinating. It's an open source tool developed by the University of Maryland. It allows the scheduling of integrity checks to verify that the digital records have not been compromised or tampered with, but it looks really powerful. And again, the title kind of tells you what its goal was. It wants to control the environment of those digital records. And then we already talked about Fixity AV Preserve. That's the subscription one that you can either use it manually, or I think if you buy the Pro one, you can schedule. Okay. So that's a real fast thing for Fixities. If anybody has any Fixity software that they really like to use that I didn't cover, please feel free to put it in the chat and we can talk about it, see if it's something I've heard of. What's kind of cool now with digital archiving and digital records is there's so many options in place, and more coming. So I like to play with these things. So anyway, Matt, I'm moving to you on disaster preparedness tools.
Yeah, thanks, Cindy. And just briefly mention 2 tools that, in addition to Content Manager, that the state of Oregon uses to practice resilience, I think is the term we talk about now, which covers both disaster preparedness, disaster recovery, business continuity planning. What's another term for it? Continuity of operations, all of that good stuff, keeping the agency up and running and also preserving life safety during disasters. And disasters, it's not a case of if, it's just when, and it's also a question of, is your agency prepared for that? So Secretary of State acquired 2 tools to assist us with that, both of which we've put into action. First one is Bold Planning, and it's a cloud computing solution that assists IT and records professionals. We use it in a number of ways. When there's a snow day or a large protest near our buildings or other public safety issues, Bold Planning keeps track of employee personal contact information. I volunteer my personal cell phone. I want to know if there's a disaster at the building. It happens Saturday morning so that we can activate our employees. And that pushes text notifications or sends emails automatically to affected staff to notify them. And usually it's something like, the office is closed today, don't come in, type of thing, which gets pushed out to employees that volunteer their personal contact info. It's also got a whole bunch of other modules. It's got file archive for your disaster planning documents. It's got the certifications that we have. It's got emergency kits. It's got supply lists. We rely on it for all kinds of stuff. And one of the nicest things about it, it's mobile as well. So you can access the site, and and administrators can push notifications to employees. They can access the files in bold planning, just wherever they are. And then the second tool we use, at the time that we got it, it was a free tool. They have transitioned D-Plan, disaster plan tool to a subscription service. It's subsidized. It's a fairly affordable option, and we still recommend it. So it's really just a series of templates and worksheets that you go to, and then it prompts you what types of materials do you want to protect, file formats. In our building, we identified 25 different file formats just because we have records going back to the beginning before the statehood in 1859, territorial records before that, which exist in all kinds of formats. And so for each type of format, you want to have the proper retention and preservation tactics. And so for each one you identify, you check a box, and then it includes a paragraph on caring for those materials in your customized disaster plan. That's just one example. We filled out tons of other risk assessments, and we input our critical files in there as well. But it's just got ready answers for disaster response, disaster recovery, and it's also mobile ready, so we can access that agency disaster plan from any device. So those are some of the tools in addition to Content Manager that our agency uses to be prepared.
Thanks, Matt. So I went ahead and, I guess being an archivist, I started classifying the tools that we use. Let me go back a slide. See if I skipped. Yep, I skipped over. I knew I. Okay. So we wanted to talk about what type of records management tools we use. And so, Carmen, here you go.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to talk about the first one, and then obviously Cindy can talk about the rest. Gimmel Physical, which we call RIMS for shortness reasons, and it used to be called Infolinks. This is our system that we use to track all of the paper records that are stored at our offsite storage. And it is just a fancy database. It's relatively easy to use for the end user. We are on our third version of it, so I am able to do some customization behind the scenes, and we're continually tweaking it. And it works really well for us. We're hoping to integrate our permanent collection, our permanent records into RIMS starting this year. So it is not, you don't have to have a license to use it. We just have to set you up in the system. If you are a state employee, it's easy enough to get set up and use it. The people at the agencies make their boxes, print the labels, send the boxes to us. You can request files out of those boxes to be returned to you. We run disposition approval reports, just basically destruction reports, twice a year, January and July, and send them out to the agencies for approval. And once we get the approval, then we process those boxes and get them off the shelves. So obviously it attaches retention schedules to every single box that's in the system. It works well for us.
Okay, so for Micro Focus Content Manager, Matt did an amazing job describing it. I don't feel like I really need to go into detail other than it's a records management application. That's what it's built for. But it does have the capability of handling archival permanent records as well. Sarah?
We have one question. I think I'll just go ahead and take it right now and ask you, and Carmen. Is there a benefit to using RIMS for physical storage versus content manager for digital archiving?
Who's gonna go first?
I'll let you go.
Yeah, well, RIMS was designed, Gimbal Physical was designed specifically for paper. I mean, it does have a digital component to it now that that they are continuing to work on. But since we've set it up, we've gone this direction. We use RIMS for paper and the digital archives for digital.
Yeah, so in my mind, there's not really an advantage to using one over the other. It just depends on if it's a paper document or if it's a digital record. In addition to RIMS, which basically those are non-permanent records. We also have the archive side of the shop as well, where we handle the permanent stuff, and I'll get to there's a tool section for that. Okay,
And-
so yes.
I was just gonna say, and Francis, like, I will say that I'm a little biased in some aspect. I'm a digital archivist as well. I do love paper. Trust me, I'm a true archivist. Love paper, love everything. But if you're trying to find a resource quickly and you specifically, if you still have physical items, you have to actually ask for those items back. If you have start using the digital archives, you can actually look up the items yourself because you'll have direct access to the materials that you've uploaded for your department. So I don't know if that was the
Good.
core of your question, but I thought I'd throw that in there for you.
Yeah, that's good. So the last tool, I wasn't sure if I wanted to put it on or not, because it's not a tool we use per se. It's actually a tool that ETS, the state's IT department, uses. So basically they're charged with the email system, and they use Google Vault to capture the emails, the Google Drive, and Google websites. What the issue I see with Google Vault, which I brought up to them, is it's a good way to capture it, but it is not a backup strategy. It does not make extra copies. Plus, you're missing the whole records management. Do you really need to keep everybody's email forever? Which is what they're currently doing. But again, the archives, we're talking with them about setting up a more managed approach. So I appreciate that we have the opportunity to put our 2 cents in with them. Okay, let's see if I can. Good. Okay, so digital access tools. In my mind, that means how do we let the public see it? Of course, even this, right before lunch, I was adding more tools because I keep thinking I left stuff off. But I'll start with these 2 and then I'll add the third one that I didn't put on there. So Luna imaging, it's similar to some archivists would know Content DM, but it's a kind of a pared down version of it. Basically, we use it for our photos, maps, oral histories, discrete item things, where you want to be able to search and pull up a single item. That's what we use Luna imaging for. The Internet Archive, it's kind of connected to Luna imaging because what we do with our, when I digitize like a cassette tape, an oral history, I will put so we save the WAV file to our network. But then the public version, the MP3, I put in the Internet Archive, and then I link it. I put a link on a PDF document and I throw it in Luna imaging for searching. I know you're thinking, why would you do that, Cindy? But it's because the Internet Archive doesn't charge for storage, and we have to pay for storage with Luna imaging. So it's kind of an end run. But it also makes it more widely accessible, which is ultimately our goal. We, and then the third tool I forgot to mention, of course, was Content Manager has what's called a web drawer, which allows public access to anything that's not restricted. We don't use it that much because we think it's clunky, but we're going to work on that.
We have a question from Stephanie. Do you have any experience with or advice about Omeka?
I do not. Sarah, how about you?
You know, I don't think I do actually either. I'm so sorry, Stephanie. I can't help you with that. I
If
know
any-
that
if-
I'm sorry.
I was
Go
gonna say,
ahead.
if anybody else on the call knows about it, please feel free to speak up. Anyway, go ahead, Sarah.
Oh, I was just going to say, I know that Omeka has totally open source section, but there is a section where you can pay somebody to help you out. But other than that, I really don't know. Hopefully somebody will get back to us on this. Chris Stenson said he used it to create an online exhibit once, but that was about 15 years ago.
Okay, so in some ways, it's a good transition to this next slide. What online finding aid tools do we use? Oh, somebody moved it on me. So back in the day, our first online finding aids were in the Rocky Mountain Online Archive. We were part of the original group. So they had a process in place where we could generate finding aids. I was gonna say somebody's messing with my stuff. We could generate finding aids, put them online. But the Rocky Mountain Online Archive, they ended up needing to upgrade their server or whatever, and decided to stop having it. And so suddenly our online finding aids were no longer available. And we were looking at archive space for a while, but kind of similar with Omeka, archive space is open source, and our ETS, our IT department, doesn't necessarily like open source as much because they feel like it's a security issue. But we managed to convince them to give us a shot at setting up a pilot one. They could look at their security concerns, and we could play with it and make sure we liked it. So we have an archive space instance running. We also, there's a way in archive space where you can link scanned files or digital objects to your finding aids. So we're using that. We also, as part of the finding aid project, we use Oxygen XML editor to, sometimes you have to edit what goes into archive space, and it's a EAD file, so it's kind of coding type stuff. So Oxygen XML editor is pretty cool because it has a capability of verifying that we've got all of our stuff set up properly. The other solution down below, XML copy editor software, is actually kind of a free variety of Oxygen, because Oxygen you have to pay for the license. The XML copy editor is free, but it does not have the verification capability, but it works really well. So what we did on some of it is some staff had Oxygen and some didn't, and if they got stuck, they could come to one of the Oxygen users and they could do the verification to see what line had an issue. Hopefully that makes sense. And then web capture tool. So later in the what have we played with, I've got a couple other options, but basically the web capture tool we use is Archivist, which is again a subscription-based product where we pay them every year and we get so many gigabytes of storage that we can use. You can schedule your web crawls. So they do so many at a time, so many times a year. What's one of the cool things about it is you can do a test crawl, so you can see ahead of time what you're gonna get, because sometimes when you try to capture a web page, just you end up in this strange loop, and you end up trying to capture half of the internet if you're not careful. I might exaggerate, but it's close. To be honest, I find it annoying because they say that you can't be a perfectionist and work with web capture, because I want it to look the way it looks. It doesn't always happen. So I have to focus on capturing what info I can, which will I'll get into when I talk about some of the other tools I tested. I added the Internet Archives to it because they're the ones that set up Archivist. But also for the Internet Archive, I think Sara mentioned yesterday that they have a tool called the Wayback Machine, where you can open up a website and you can tell it, hey, can you capture this? And it'll capture it. So I use that every once in a while if there's something that I'm not gonna schedule a crawl for, but I think it's important they get. What's kind of cool too with Archivist is it'll check, and if that website has already been captured by somebody else already, it won't recapture it, so it doesn't go against my limit. Okay. I know, once it goes, it goes. So this one, there's multiple slides for what I consider scanning and processing tools that we use. And Carmen's going to come on because she's in charge of the State Imaging Center, and they use the first tool.
Yeah, Foxit PDF Editor Pro 12 used to be known as Foxit Phantom. It's an Adobe Acrobat-like software, but I think it's cheaper and it's very robust in what it can do. But you can buy it one time, or you can pay subscription. You've got the option. I think Adobe Acrobat can do the same. I'm not sure. I didn't look into it that close, but the Imaging Center uses it to process the images that they scan using our large format scanners, and decrop or deskew, crop, all of those things that you can think of to do with Adobe Acrobat. So and then you get a discount if you buy more than one copy at a time. So we like it. It suits our needs.
So the next one, I don't know how many people have heard of it. It's called OrphanView. So I had this challenge. I had a bunch of JPEG 2000 or J2K files that I wanted to convert to PDF, but I didn't want them to end up in one big batch. I wanted to be individually converted. And so I played with all sorts of software and came up with OrphanView. And kind of how the title explains it, it's a tool that's used for viewing a variety of formats. So it's a very powerful viewer, but it also has a batch conversion capability. It is free. You can purchase the pro version. It's like $12 or something. And it is it's portable, so you could add it to a flash drive and move it from machine to machine if you want to. It's pretty cool. File renamer. Basically there's 20 million different versions of this, but basically sometimes when you get files and you may want to add something to the front of it to help identify a better front of the file name or something on the end. It'll allow you to batch rename things. And it'll show you when you add what you want to do, it'll show you an example. So, going in. Again, it is free. I've seen a lot of different versions of it. It's kind of cool. Terracopy is, I'm biased. I feel like it's pretty widely used. It's basically on Windows, you can drag and drop something and it just copies it for you. But it's I feel like you lose some control there. And so what TerraCopy does is you tell it, hey, I want to copy this to this, and it'll show you the process as it goes, and it'll validate as it goes to make sure that it's copied exactly what you wanted to copy. So it's a very powerful tool. It can be a little slower than Windows if you've got a boatload, but not that much slower. So that is my default for whenever I copy and paste folders in Windows. Okay. So what is it with me and 7-zip, right? So I mean, it's a reality. You get zipped files from people. Sometimes you have to send it to them. You can use the standard Windows zip tool. But again, I like 7-zip because it helps you keep closer track of what's going on. And it's free. The disclaimer, I think, with any of the zip tools is you have to be careful who you're getting the zip file from, because it's possible to slip a virus in the zipped file and you wouldn't know until you opened it. So that's the one disclaimer. Handbrake. I use that for, again, Handbrake is a open source downloadable tool. I use it to, it can be used to convert a large variety of video formats to archival long-term formats. It's good. I used it for many years. I found that if for some reason the video format had more than one track, it had a tendency to not get the second one. And that could just be my ignorance in how I set it up. But Handbrake's a really good, easy way if you need to create a MP4 of a of like an MOV file or some type of film format. And these are the ones I figured out I left off yesterday when I made the slides originally, but I use Audacity like every day. Basically, Audacity is a tool you can use, a free tool that you can download and use to digitize audio. And it's widely used in the archives community. It allows you to change your settings to whether it's the audio, a mono or stereo. After you digitize, you can go back and if you save your WAV file and then you want to, like, there's a section of it, it kind of shows like almost a grid, I think, I don't know what you call it. But if you find that there's a section that's quite a bit quieter than the rest, you can go in and select it and make it louder. So it's pretty easy to use. I highly recommend it if you're going to digitize audio. Basically, I can get my machine going and hit the record button, get my machine going, and it just goes. And it maintains whatever setting I had, so I don't have to remember my settings. And then Acrobat, Acrobat 10. Carmen talked about Foxit. Her and her people have Foxit. I have Acrobat 10 because that's what I inherited. Again, they are really similar. Every once in a while, there's a distinction in how it does things. Like, for example, I had a bunch of stuff that I need a bunch of PDFs that I needed to do something to. Foxit was way more streamlined. Acrobat did it, but it did it one. Every single one I had to click. Okay. But I really like its capability to OCR, or optical character recognition. It's very powerful. And then we also use Photoshop elements, but when we scan our photos. And I think it's probably, it'll be on another slide. There's a free version of similar to Elements that we played with in the past as well. But Elements works pretty well. Okay, so And Alejandra, since you mentioned these in your slides, I went ahead and put them in. If you want to speak to them, you can, but I'm prepared to give quick comments on these in case people were curious about it. So the Indus election. I'm assuming the thumbs up means go for it, Cindy. The Indus Electronic Document and Management System / Virtual Office. Again, it's a subscription-based archival and retrieval system. The Ignite, or I'm probably saying it wrong, is a subscription cloud-based file sharing solution. So it helps with collaborative efforts and helps with securing access. Headlog IT is a subscription-based, cloud-based museum content management system for both mobile and desktop use. And then Recur2 is a content management system and digital access tool for cultural heritage. And it's built for and in ongoing dialogue with the indigenous communities. So it's pretty cool that they have a system that's focused towards their needs. Okay, so here's the tools I use the word experimented, but we'll just say played with. I already talked about the Wayback Machine. I had a web page. It was a Google site page that the governor's office wanted captured before they took it down. And Archivist wasn't, in my mind, being a perfectionist, wasn't doing a good job. I did job of it. So I played with the web recorder and it did okay. Again, it's a suite of open tools used to capture interactive websites, and we play them as accurately as possible. There's always that disclaimer. And then BitCurator, I think most archivists recognize it. That's that suite of open source software that you can use for the whole process. A lot of these tools, they have a version of it in BitCurator. It runs on, it doesn't use the Windows as its operating software. It uses something called Ubuntu. And so, yeah, we have a computer that's set up with BitCurator, but I'll be honest, I use the other tools instead. And then GIMP was the one I promised to talk to you about, which is the other photo processing software. It is totally free, downloadable, very powerful. It's just not as user-friendly as Photoshop Elements. But if you don't want to pay the money for Photoshop Elements, GIMP is totally the way to go. You can save it to a bunch of different formats. And Sara, next we've got the equipment stuff, but we had already determined if we didn't have time, we can skip that part if there's any questions we need to answer.
Cindy, I think you missed a page, or I mean a slide.
Did I?
Yep, I think so.
I talked about that one.
Yeah, go back one.
You're right. Okay. Okay, so these are some tools we played with when I was playing with how to handle emails. ePad is one of the primary open source tools. It helps with appraisal, processing, discovery, and delivery of email archiving. It kind of falls into the BitCurator suite because you end up having to partition your drive or have it set up special. I think they have a Windows version, so I'm waiting to see how that goes. And then Emailchemy is one of my favorite tools when it comes to email, because a lot of times you have a bunch of email formats that nobody uses anymore. Emailchemy will convert it to an archival one. And Sara mentioned you can use Acrobat to print websites, which is ultimately what I did with that random Google site. And then I mentioned Preservica starter yesterday. Thank you, Carmen, for letting me know I skipped that. Sarah, did you want to?
Sure. So we just want to make sure that there is time to answer any questions that you might have. I do see that Glenn did comment a little bit ago about that he has used in-front view for 20 plus years. So I'm glad that we selected that tool. Does anybody have any specific questions? You can unmute yourself or go ahead and ask them in the chat box, or go ahead and direct message me. I would be happy to talk about that.
Or is there a favorite tool I need to check out? Because I'm always on the lookout for new cool tools or old cool tools.
And then Matt, Chris, Alejandra, if there's anything that you guys want to talk about a little bit more, go ahead and jump in as well. While we wait for more comments, do you want to talk a little bit about some of the digitized equipment that we use?
Yep. Okay, and I didn't include a list of them, but they are available in our, Sarah had sent out a link to a Google Drive folder that has our resources in it. And so there's a link to all of the tools that I've talked about. So equipment, I split it into two groups because that seems to be a thing for me. And so first for the State Imaging Center, they have a Book-i 4 VIA. It's a flatbed book and oversized document scanner. It has a book cradle that helps with scanning. It scans up to 24 inches by 33 inches. They also have a Meckel Mach 5 microfilm roll scanner, which is pretty slick because you can scan a roll of film in less than 10 minutes. Of course, then there's the rest of the part where you have to process it and make it look pretty. But the scan itself is quick. And then most of the scanners that they use day to day is their Panasonic KV S7075. It's one of those, it's a rotary and a flatbed scanner. So they can open the lids if it's something that shouldn't go through a rotary, and it scans up to 12 by 17. And moving on to the State Archives equipment. I talked about, I have the Bit Curator forensic computer. And then we have two map size scanners. They're both rotary. The first one is the oldest. It's an HP Design Jet 800 PS. It scans up to 42 inches wide. And it's still doing a great job after 15 years. And then the other scanner we have is a Context Next Image 4. And it, as compared to the HP one, it will actually go up to 54 inches wide. We also have, we jokingly call it the mother of all scanners. It's an Epson Expression 10,000 XL. It's a double glass scanner, so you can use it to scan negatives and documents up to 11 by 17. And then we have the smaller version, which is the Epson Perfection V850. Again, double glass, so we can scan negatives. And it does 8.5 by 11.7. In the research room, we have, for the public to use, they use ST view scans. And those machines will allow them to read, scan, or print. Since doesn't cost us anything for them to scan the documents, they can scan what they want for free. And then I have a Tableau device, which is basically a device that when you go to add a flash drive or a drive, it's a write blocker. So basically it helps ensure that the documents that are transferred from flash drive to the computer are transferred without any changes, any like the dates changing, things like that. So that's a quick and dirty list of our equipment. I'm sure I've missed some because I have been.
No, that's okay. That's great, Cindy. So we still don't have any questions, but I do want to note that we do have like a lot of microfilm in the state archives. I'm sure a lot of the state archives have them. And so having the MECL is really useful, and the ones in the reading room, the ST viewers, are really great. We actually lent out one of our newest microfilm scanners, viewers to Vital Records here at the state. And they actually bought an additional part to do quick microfiche scanning because they have a lot of microfiche. And they said so far it's been very successful.
Okay, so someone wants to know, what did I just talk about with the, okay, so it's actually a write blocker. And it's a Tableau forensic USB bridge. And it's been used by the archives community for more than 20 years because there's a concern that when you, if you're not careful and you don't use Terra copy and you go to copy documents, that it sometimes messes with the date created. Right, Sarah, there's more to it than that, I know.
There's a lot of different metadata that you can mess up if you just drag and drop.
Yeah.
But the write blockers, WRIT, kind of prevents that kind of metadata from being, yes, I think it's very valuable, from being changed over time. And that verifies its authenticity and
that it's fixed.
that it's fixed, yeah.
Of course, my one grumble about it is if you've got a floppy drive, it doesn't work. It just doesn't understand it. So whatever. Sarah, I was thinking you might want to mention real quick the traveling kits too. There's might be some people that
for those of you that live here in Wyoming or work here in Wyoming, the Wyoming SHRAB has purchased 2 digitization toolkits and 2 oral history toolkits. They're meant to be sent around the state for institutions, organizations, clubs to use to capture Wyoming history, Wyoming records. In the digitization toolkit, there is specifically a laptop, a flatbed scanner that can also do negatives up to a certain size. There is a floppy disk drive because we've been finding that people are hoarding their floppy drives, and we know that you probably want to capture whatever's on there for your own history. The oral history toolkits actually include a microphone with lavaliers, so you can pin them to your lapel when talking. A digital recorder. It has a few other elements as well. And both of these toolkits also have a little bit of how to use them, quick start guides, but also we have guides for like how to conduct oral histories and certain forms that you could use to make your own form, or even ideas for how you should save your type of recordings or digitization kind of projects. Alejandra, it is great to hear that you're going to check one of these out. Currently, we do have both our oral history toolkits and digitization toolkits have been used, and we do have one of our toolkits, digitization toolkits, checked out right now. But we do have another one available, and just go to the Wyoming SHRAB webpage that is available through the Wyoming State Archives webpage, or you can just email me at Sara, SARA.Davis@yo.gov.
Sarah, when I kept talking about those photo scanners, that they had double glass lids. What that means is, if you want to scan a negative, you need to be able to have the light source come from on top instead of under the bottom. And so I believe the toolkits have double glass.
Yes, they are able to do negatives, but you know, the size of the glass is limited to a
Yeah,
certain
it's
size.
not a mother of all scanners, it's the
Yeah.
smaller one.
It's the smaller version to be able to travel out and about to the different areas of the state. So, and which is, I'm still not seeing any further comments, but I will make a plug for those of you specifically in Wyoming. We are hosting an in-person workshop on preserving our photographic materials and audiovisual materials workshop on identification and care. It will be held at the University of Wyoming's American Heritage Center on Thursday, June 22nd. It will be an all-day workshop scheduled to begin at 9 a.m. and conclude at 4 p.m. So please email me or reach out to me, give me a call. The registration is online where you found these links as well. It's limited to 30 registrants, but if there's one or two over, we might be able to fit you in anyway. So Deborah said that she would love to see additional workshops in person like this, but she can't make that date. Okay. Oh, for digital preservation. Yes, we would love to be able to do these kind of workshops more in person as well. And we will be coming up with a new schedule for the next year on, so, you know, I'm going to send out a survey to all the participants and a resources folder and links to the online YouTube page. If you have any ideas for additional resources or workshops that you would like to see, please fill out the survey, let me know. And please let us know how this workshop worked out for you and what we can do to improve. We're very want to be cognizant of our Wyoming communities and our colleagues across the United States. So please let us know what we can do to better meet your needs. We really appreciate you joining us today. All of our contacts for everybody that presented today is on this page here for you. We really appreciate your time, and please don't hesitate to reach out.